a hacker can also get to the same front-end interface and start trying to log in. Turn on MFA.
Welcome to the Digital Customer Communications Podcast, where we discover how regulated companies engage, retain, and delight customers at scale. Today, we're talking about cybersecurity and digital communications and why getting the basics right matters more than ever. As businesses scale digital operations and customer communications in regulated environments, the risks are growing too. Joining me is Neil Furminger, Head of Cyber Essentials at the IASME Consortium. Neil works closely with organizations to help them understand and improve their cybersecurity and to make strong foundations achievable for everyone. Hi, Neil.
Hi.
Nice to have you with us today. If you can start by giving us a bit of an intro to your role and what you do at IASME, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm Neil Furminger, so I'm the Head of Cyber Essentials at IASME. I've been working on the Cyber Essentials scheme on and off in various different guises now for 9 to 10 years. My current role is I work very closely with the NCSC on the technical development of Cyber Essentials. So all the touch points in Cyber Essentials, the requirements document that is publicly available on the National Cybersecurity Centre website, and the question set, which is freely available, I have in hand in developing those and making sure they follow the requirements, etc. But also I go out talking to large companies and give presentations on it and talk about the basic security controls that are outlined in Cyber Essentials.
So Cyber Essentials, for anyone that doesn't know, isn't just, the essential things that you need to be doing, although that's a large part of it in concept, but it's an actual sort of certification. So can you give a bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, it is a certification. But it is, as you say, Sam, it's basic controls that everybody should be putting in place to make them secure against common cyber attacks. But Cyber Essentials is actually a UK government certification that is designed by the NCSC and has been in place now for 11 years. And it's a certification in two parts. So you have a self-assessment, which is signed and then audited by a trained assessor, of which currently we have over 900 assessors across the UK. Then there's a second part, which is the one that's getting more traction, is Cyber Essentials Plus, and that's the audited version. So it's an audit of the assessment. The auditor goes in and runs some tests on the organisation and a sample devices to make sure the controls have been applied and been applied correctly and within the timescales and the requirements outlined in the standard.
So you're obviously getting the output of those. I guess it's a good survey of the controls across the board, across various industries and various companies and how they're adhering to them, as well as you're probably looking at companies as the input to writing those questions as well. So you've got a good view of cybersecurity at large across the UK. What kind of challenges what are the biggest challenges that people get wrong when it comes to cybersecurity in businesses?
There are lots of different misinformation out there. Oh no, we're never going to get attacked. We're too small to be attacked. They're not interested in us.
Yeah.
Cyber Essentials doesn't deal with that. We're dealing with the common cyber attacks, things like phishing, password guessing and vulnerabilities, so being exploited. So this is where your patches and updates comes in. But they lead, and other things like ransomware, and Cyber Essentials has been proven to be very effective against those kinds of attacks. Lots of people, small companies, think they're not going to get attacked, but these are for the opportunist doesn't know whether it's a small company, a large company at times when they're carrying out attacks, and these are by low-skilled attackers. So we see cyber attacks out there carried out by what they call script kiddies in their bedrooms at home, have carried out attacks, and less skilled people because the tools are readily available. So we fight that, but we still fight, or not fight, but still have to educate on some very basic kind of administrative processes that you use in your network. Understanding the devices and the assets you have in your organisation is really important. you don't have a cybersecurity plan if you don't know where to put the controls or the technical settings that we talk about in Cyber Essentials if you don't understand the devices you've got. So we talk lots of things like that. We don't like to patch. We don't like to put our updates on. They crash. Majority of patches and updates, you're being told to put them in a timely manner because there's a major security update that needs to be put in place on those systems. And so we're still having to educate on things that have been going around for 25, 30 years. And because people like the ease of use of systems, and there's a balance between ease of use and having a good cybersecurity platform.
There's a lot of stuff, I imagine, in the Cyber Essentials questions or question set that remains the same over the years. And then there's obviously you're updating it as new common threats arise, things like the evolution of cloud and then AI and things like that. So let's start with the basics then. You mentioned passwords there.
Yeah.
In terms of passwords, okay, we all know that we shouldn't be using 12345, right? What are the other kind of common problems that you see across organizations?
Well, the thing with passwords and usernames is that it's fast moving away from being the default way to log in or authenticate into systems now. It's just seen as having those two factors alone is not strong enough to stop people attacking, because there's a lot of things password guessing. So we have had a lot of high profile cyber attacks where credentials, so your username and password have been stolen and they've been made available on the dark web. So there are reference points in the dark web where you can buy these huge lists of passwords, and you can get attack tools there that can just keep password guessing all the time, using these lists against email addresses, etc., that have been, stolen from cyber attacks. And we're all know about that. There's some high profile ones going on at the moment where they say some customer login details have been stolen, but if they've been stolen, it's likely they could end up on the dark web, and then the attackers will end up using them. So passwords, yes, you must have a strong password on anything. Okay, we say in Cyber Essentials at least 8 characters when you have multi-factor authentication. We'll talk about multi-factor authentication soon. But the NCSE guidance, which Cyber Essentials says, is to use 3 random words. That can be quite strong because it's harder to crack because we've got so many million words in the English language. You randomise 3 of them together, it makes it vastly more complicated to hack and discover that password. But even the complex passwords, the hackers are aware that if you have an O or in the password you use, they would change it to a 0. They have these algorithms and these scanning tools that understand that, and they're very quick to guess. So nowadays, what we're saying is you need to use multi-factor. So it could be known as multi-factor, 2-factor, or 2-step verification. You put your username and password in place, and then you're asked for another factor. It could be sent to your email or a text message, or you've got to look at an app or something like that, or you've just got to log in with another biometric on it to allow you access into those systems. And we see the major vendors such as Microsoft, etc., adopting multi-factor, and we see in everyday life banking systems have been using it for quite a while on your online banking apps, etc. But multi-factor is fast becoming the default way to log into systems.
Yeah, I remember my the earliest instance of that being when I used to be with Barclays, I think, and they give you a little calculator looking thing to put your card in. And it just reminded me of that because things have moved on so much, haven't they?
Multi-factor's been, as you say, it's been around a long time. I know with my own banking, I've had exactly the same thing. I think I've had it a number of years now, but it's increasingly on more and more systems and more services you access across the internet.
Yeah, and when we talk about using devices, specifically SMS and authenticator apps for 2-factor, how effective are these?
Well, they're certainly a definite inhibitor beyond the username and password. So any form of multi-factor, having that in place is always going to help stop somebody trying to log in as yourself at the end of the day. Yes, there are weaknesses in certain types of multi-factor authentication, but as far as Cyber Essentials sees it, let's put in any form of multi-factor authentication in really helps to stop the common cyber attacks taking place. And that's anything. So if you're using social media, etc., most social media platforms have multi-factor. Turn it on. You don't want people getting valuable details and impersonating people, etc., because they've managed to get in their account. If you've got multi-factor on, it makes it quite a lot harder for them to carry out attacks and steal that information.
I've heard that it's in the 90% that multi-factor protects against, but I think that's less to do with the spread of different types of attacks that are available and out there and exist, and more to do with the kind of usage of, like you say, the most common ones, and that's what Cyber Essentials is there to protect against.
Yes. So if an opportunist is just doing an attack and randomly attacking a number of accounts at the same time, and they get in, and because it's just got username and password, because they're doing password guessing, they can get in. But if it then goes, I need another piece of information, they might just say, that's too much, I'll move on and go elsewhere. Cyber Essentials is a lot about decision points. We create decision points to protect yourself from attack, but equally that also gives the hacker, that's a decision point. Do I want to carry on with this, or is there an easier target?
Yeah, it makes you less vulnerable, less of an easy target.
Yeah.
And in terms of the actual process of Cyber Essentials, can you walk us through exactly how you would meet those criteria? Is it you just fill out some questions, or like you say, with Cyber Essentials Plus, you do an audit as well?
Yeah. So Cyber Essentials is a question set to get the certificate. But the controls in Cyber Essentials, and there's 5 areas you're doing Cyber Essentials, are technical controls, and you're writing evidence that you understand why they're in place and how you apply those technical controls. So unlike other assurances that are out there where the organisation makes a risk-based judgment on, and they can judge their risk appetite. The risk appetite has already taken place, and that risk assessment has been carried out by the National Cybersecurity Centre on behalf of the UK government. And the 5 controls that are in Cyber Essentials, everybody has to comply and do all 5 controls to achieve Cyber Essentials. And the 5 controls are about firewalls, so they are your boundaries to the internet, and you have to put a number of controls on there, like changing the default password on the firewall. That's really important. Block inbound ports by default. The inbound ports are like doorways into your organization from the internet. You need to block those. So that's firewalls. And then we have something about secure configuration, which is securing your end user devices. We're talking about your laptops and desktops and mobile phones, and some measures about removing unrequired software, unrequired accounts on it. Big one we talked about a lot in Cyber Essentials is about security updating your system. So security update management control, where we ask high and critical ranked updates to be applied on systems within 14 days of release. That's the one that's most talked about in Cyber Essentials, and has been throughout my entire journey with Cyber Essentials. We always talk about that one. And then the bit we've touched on today, which is user access controls, so about your user accounts and your administrator accounts, and securing them up with passwords and multi-factor authentication, and making sure that your user accounts don't have admin privileges or administration rights, permissions to install software, etc. You don't want that on the standard user account. You want to have separated accounts, because basically if a attacker gets hold of your standard account with admin rights on it, admin permissions, they've got keys to the kingdom, either to that device or even wider on your network. And the final one is malware protection. So that's having some form of malicious software protection to block viruses, etc. It used to be known as antivirus, but nowadays it goes way beyond just viruses. There's all kinds of malicious software out there that you need to be protected against. And they're the 5 controls, and we tell everybody this is how you want them configured, and you're basically saying this is how we do it in your organisation through the question set.
So we talked about the basics there, and a lot of that is, when you go through the 5 pillars
Yeah, 5 controls. Yeah.
5 controls. A lot of those do sound very basic, but equally, I can see how the criteria can change every year. We talked about passwords. In terms of this year alone, I've maybe set pass keys on 5 or 6 of the apps that I use every day. And that's a new thing that people will start seeing pop up more and more. Yeah. Is that something that you're addressing in the latest set? And can you maybe just give a bit of an explanation of passkeys for people who don't know?
Passkeys is a step on from multi-factor authentication or two-step verification. Passkeys don't have normally a password involved, so there's something not to be guessed. So passkeys are seen as being phishing resistant. They can't be phished. So you don't put in a username and password, you use a biometric which links to some other thing or some other piece of security information unique to that organization or unique to you as a user that's been created by the service, and then you verify it with your biometric, your fingerprint, could be an eye scan. There's various different biometrics, or you may have something you carry around with you with a fob, which may be a pass key, gives you a unique number that changes every so often, but that can't be guessed. Then you input that and then you can log in, and that's going to make things a lot harder to do this. The problem is we're on a roadmap or a journey to adopting passkeys. They are relatively new in the format we're seeing them now, where they link to cloud services and websites. I've been asked recently to set it up on eBay. Some of the major, very common websites we use in our daily life, they are asking us to use passkeys to protect those logins. I would say adopt them, but we're a bit of a way in Cyber Essentials to just saying you can only do it with passkeys. We have to go on a bit of a journey over the next 3 years to take people and educate people more, because Cyber Essentials, even though we're telling everybody to do certain controls like passkeys, it's an education process we find as well.
What are the best ways to stay up to date with this stuff, to keep educated? Is there a sort of central reserve of information that people can go to on the IASME website or NCSC or something like that?
Yeah, so the NCSC has lots of great guidance, okay? But sometimes not all the guidance is, it's catered for many organisations, but they talk about lots of other layers of cybersecurity in there, and sometimes people can get bogged down. So to align Cyber Essentials alongside NCSE guidance, we also have the Cyber Essentials Knowledge Hub, which sits on the IASME website and talks about how to apply these basic controls, etc., and give you all lots of really good information about Cyber Essentials written in different language, so to make it a bit easier to understand. But I have to have the caveat, it's still technical stuff. We're just trying to find new ways to talk about technical stuff so the man on the street can understand it a bit better than if you're a non-techie. Because often, many people find a struggle with it because they're not technical. And we're trying to tell people to do something technical. So we do a lot of work trying to demystify the technical side of it, and actually you can apply these basic things relatively easy.
Well, especially in a business where something that gets deployed involves a project with technical people and people who have to make decisions about compliance and risk and other things and actually manage the project, change managers, things like that. All these people have to be involved. And that's kind of the decision maker set that we get listening to this podcast often, because it's around enterprise communications, communicating with customers and deploying sort of solutions for that.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to that a little bit, in terms of rolling out new communication solutions or communicating with customers at scale in the enterprise, what are the kind of common challenges that you see in getting some of this stuff implemented or doing it right?
The biggest challenge I see is knowing what devices in a larger organisation you have and where you need to apply these basic controls. So the controls that are outlined in Cyber Essentials and the standard is they should be your building blocks to a cyber your cybersecurity layers. It's the first rung on the ladder. You get there, right, you're on your start. Then you build on top of those layers. I'm not saying Cyber Essentials is the only way, but you need to understand where to apply the technical controls. That is the most important thing at the start. And then you can break it down in different areas. Certain things will require may need different protection at a later date, but you still need to make sure people can't log in, it's kept up to date, etc. And in the first instance, it's securely configured and you take parts out of it you don't want. So the controls of Cyber Essentials apply for the very smallest organizations to the largest enterprises, and throughout all the certificates we have that huge range of organisations who have it, so it very much applies to larger organisations such as this. But this is about your internet facing devices. Cyber Essentials is trying to protect from attacks from the internet, common cyber attacks, which unfortunately we see happen to large companies, we happen to small companies all the time. These basic controls, every organisation should be putting them in. The big challenge for larger organisations is doing it at scale. So it's how they manage and continually manage to make sure they're in place. That's the thing we see with large organisations.
Well, we've seen some of the most recent attacks. I'm thinking, M&S and Co-op. That was a couple of weeks ago. I think we talked about that. Were very human-centric in their attack mode, and the vulnerability was quite basic as far as I understand it in terms of those controls. So even these large organizations, when they're attacked, often we see it's just a case of human error. That brings me back to thinking, from a question on the enterprise scale to someone who is working in a business every day, and I've got maybe an hour later today after I listen to this podcast, to do something to tighten my security, to make sure that I'm not going to be the gap in the business's defense. What would you suggest that I could do in that hour?
I would look at the device that's sat in front of you, make sure it's got its updates on at the latest updates, and never ignore updates. They need to be applied. They are there for a reason. And to look at the systems you are using and look at making sure and start looking at all those ones you connect to the internet that you log into, and start to deploy and turn on MFA. As an individual user, that's what I would do. As an organisation, I would start going to your cloud services and start looking at them and turn MFA on. So much of the world has gone to using systems connected across the internet in the last 5 years because of what happened, the pandemic, etc. We're moving to a rapid world where we don't quite have software the same way. All software is delivered through your web browser, web portal, when you're using MS365 and Google Workspace and many other cloud services, and you log in there. If you can log into it across the internet, a hacker can also get to the same front-end interface and start trying to log in. Turn on MFA.
That's great practical advice. The last question I have for you today, what's your biggest challenge that you personally have in your role at the moment? What's the biggest challenge, maybe culturally, what's happening with AI and wider society, or personally in terms of, getting things done?
My biggest challenge in the role I do is still educating people that there are some simple things to do that can make quite a lot of difference. And actually, the fact that those simple things can make a big difference, have been around a long time, is challenging the misconceptions out there.
That's a great answer. Anywhere we can find you personally, or do you want to direct people to the IASME website?
Yeah, you can contact me at through the IASME website, or I'm on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Great to speak to you today. Thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you very much, Sam.